Folks, we're back. This is Steve Sampson, Jim Jones with Veterans in Politics. Today we have Chuck Muth. He's the president of Citizens Outreach. But before we go to Mr. Muth, Jim.
Just other than the fact that the state is definitely headed in a wrong direction. But I'm kind of positive about it because I'm seeing there's a lot of new blood out there, a lot of people excited running for office. I really like a lot of these new candidates I'm seeing, and they understand what's going on and what needs to be done. So for once, I'm actually optimistic. I think. I'm just hoping that I really believe that this might be a repeat of 2014 and there'll be a red wave. I just hope we keep it this time.
Yeah. If the election were held today or tomorrow, this weekend, I think the red wave is there. We got a long way to go to November. The Democrats aren't going to sit back and allow what is going on now to affect their reelection chances. So, and never forget, Republicans never blow an opportunity to blow an opportunity. And after all those years in a minority, we finally got the majority in 2014. They go into the 2015 session. What do? They pass the largest tax increase in state history. But I'm with you. I mean, there are some really good candidates out there, and there's a tremendous opportunity for conservatives, especially at the legislative level. The Assembly, I think there's only 6 maybe that are going back for sure. All the other 10 or a dozen of them have resigned, or not resigned, but retired, running for a different seat. And so maybe, and I've always said, I don't care if Republicans only have 3 members in the Assembly, as long as 2 of them are conservative, and conservatives run that caucus, I'm okay with that. And that's what we need. We need It's not enough to just elect more Republicans.
Right.
We need to elect better ones.
Yep. I agree.
So, Mr. Muth.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me after 20 years of knowing each other.
This is the first time you came on the show, huh?
You've never invited me, yeah.
We're busy.
I know. Hey, you've had good guests on. So you were hard up tonight, they said, and so they asked me if I could fill
in. Oh, that's not going to happen. Tell us about yourself.
I got started. We were talking before we were airing. I joined the Clark County Republican Central Committee early 1990s after I moved here from Baltimore, Maryland. And then I happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time in 1995. No, I got elected chairman.
I thought you got robbed.
Yeah, well, sort of. And it was interesting. I mean, that what got me started turned out to be a good friend of mine.
So you were chairman of the county party? The
county party. And then I left about 9 months later and took a job as the executive director for the state Republican Party. Okay. And I became friends with, it paid more than the county party chairman, which was a freebie. But Lynn Nofziger, Reagan's former strategist, he and I became acquaintances through my email newsletter way back then. And he gave me some really good advice at the time. He said, look, if you want to play in this game, it's kind of like being an actor. You got to go to Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And if you want to be in politics, you need to go to D.C. And so I took a job with the American Conservative Union and lived and worked back there for 2 or 3 years. But, man, just really hated it back east and couldn't wait to come back to Nevada. So we moved back. The snow, the traffic, and then, what you said. That is a dog-eat-dog world. Your best friend will stab you in the back, for $10. It's, it's just terrible. But I had young kids at the time, Steve, and I didn't want to be in D.C. going to the embassy receptions and parties and fundraisers and all. I wanted to go back home and hang out with the kids.
Okay. So that's not your whole bio. Come on.
No, but I don't know. How much time do we have?
Give me some more. Bring me up to current.
When I left the American Conservative Union, I had learned enough that, how to run a conservative organization. Right. So I took over as president of Citizen Outreach in 2003 and decided what I really wanted to do was to come back here and basically have a conservative version of the American Conservative Union right here in Nevada. And I've been ever since I went to Newt Gingrich's campaign management college in 1996, I knew when I graduated, it's a week-long course, but that's what I wanted to do, what they were doing, because I learned so much in that 1 week that I didn't know, that no one was teaching, that I wanted to come back to Nevada and train candidates. And since then, I've been a trainer for the Republican National Committee, GoPAC, the Leadership Institute, and I do my own training seminars. So I founded the Campaign Doctor just for that purpose, to train candidates.
So you train candidates?
Train candidates.
And what are the 5 principles of a candidate should know?
Well, I've got one of my lectures is the 15 worst mistakes of losing candidates, and that's a keeper.
Let's hear them.
But I don't have the 15 off the top of my head, but I'll give you my 3 main ones.
Okay.
One, and I know you've heard this, you've probably heard this too, the criticism after every election cycle, we need to recruit better candidates. But as we were saying at the start of the show, we've got great candidates. They run lousy campaigns. So it's not that it's not the best candidate who wins.
They put foot to mouth and then they blame you for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of candidates will do that. It's not putting your foot in your mouth; it's how you get it out. That's the important part, and that's a real key part of what I train. So it's not the best candidate who wins; it's the best campaign. 2, one of the biggest mistakes they make is they think they're running a political campaign. What they're really running is a marketing campaign. You need to sell. You need to persuade voters to vote for you. You need to persuade donors to donate to you. You need to persuade volunteers to volunteer for you. And you need to persuade the media to cover your campaign. So that is a big part of my training, is teaching them how to run their campaign as a marketing operation rather than a political operation. And then the third point is there is more incompetence in the field of political consulting than in any field other than TV psychiatry.
Oh, shit.
And I mean, that goes back to the first part. And it's really, really bad in Nevada. There are a handful of good, competent political consultants in Nevada, but there's a ton more who don't know anything, who know only maybe a little bit more than the first-time candidate knows, but they're getting paid money, and they're the ones who cost good candidates their campaigns. And so that's a real major problem. And when I train candidates, at least when they go out to hire a consultant, they'll know this is what I need to look for, or a campaign manager, this is what I need to look for, this is what we're doing. And if the campaign manager says, do this, and they say, no, that's not the right answer.
So what should they look for in a consultant?
I've got a whole thing. Can I plug?
Sure.
Okay. If you go to campaignDoctor.com or email me at chuck@campaignDoctor.com, that's easiest. I've got a whole special report, 40 questions to ask a campaign manager or a consultant before you hire them.
What's the top 5?
Well, here's the big one. That's a great question, Steve. Most of these candidates will immediately go to the consultants that they're told, okay, well, this is who you have to go to. Right. This person, because they have, and those consultants will say, well, I've got a 90% win rate. Well, if they've got a 90% win rate, the odds are they're cherry picking their clients. They're taking incumbents who have high name ID and deep pockets. Well, heck, how hard is that to win a campaign for re-election with that going for you? I mean, it's very, very difficult to win an upset race as a challenger candidate. So if the consultant's telling you I've got a 90% win rate, that's a red flag to you. If you're not an incumbent with a lot of money and high name ID, then maybe you need to dig a little bit deeper. I would rather work with a campaign manager or a consultant who doesn't have a 90% win rate, but has taken on tough races and is used to working on a shoestring budget, guerrilla warfare. That's what those candidates need to be looking for more than the high-priced consultants.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
I like to take a candidate that nobody knows, that has a whole lot of baggage, and get them to be winnable.
Yeah, exactly. Look, my favorite
that
candidate.
Feels a whole lot better to me than have somebody that has all kinds of name recognition and deep pockets. And why are you even there? That candidate could run himself. They don't need you.
Yeah. Right? No, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. Look, give me a candidate who's a conservative. First, it's got to be a fiscal conservative. And I won't talk to them if they're not.
Fiscal as in your wallet.
Right, exactly. And then I like candidates where the conventional wisdom says, he doesn't have a chance to win, or she doesn't have a chance to win. That. That's my kind of candidate. And my best one and favorite one of all times was Dennis Hoff in 2018.
I remember Dennis. God rest his soul, though.
Yeah, Dennis.
And he won, and he passed away
3 weeks before the election.
And he still won.
Yeah. But why everyone said that he couldn't win in the beginning, he owned 7 legal brothels. I mean, brothels are legal in Nevada. He owned 7 legal brothels. And everyone said, there's no way a brothel owner, a pimp, can win a seat in the Nevada legislature. Well, as soon as both Dennis and I, we thought very much alike, again, from a marketing standpoint, when they told Dennis there was something that he couldn't do, he just dug his heels in and he wanted to prove them wrong.
We had a stripper that became judge in Henderson, remember?
I do not remember.
What is her name?
Didn't it start with an H? We went to her house and gave her the
Yes, and we gave her the endorsement. Yeah. What is her name? She was a city attorney for a deputy city attorney for Henderson, and she became
Hampton, right?
Hampton. What's the first name?
I can't remember.
Damn it. Judge Hampton.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
I don't.
Yeah, she was a stripper at Cheetahs, and she made her way through law school. She went, because Boyd didn't exist back then.
Right.
So she went to California and went to law school and came out here, went into practice, right? And then became the deputy city attorney for Henderson and became a municipal court judge. Diana Hampton.
Yep.
There you go.
God rest her soul as well. But yeah, so this is the place you could do it.
Yeah, well, and she and Dennis, of course, they come from that side of the business, but this is something else that I look for when recruiting candidates or considering working with candidates. Mm-hmm. I love candidates who have experience in real estate sales, car sales, insurance sales. Obviously, Dennis and this woman obviously had to have sales and marketing experience because they're used to being told no, and they don't take it personally. Mm-hmm. And unless you're financially set, so wealthy that you can self-fund your campaign, you've got to go out and raise money if you want to be a really credible, viable candidate out there. And those candidates that have a sales background, they have no problem asking for money. They're used to it.
Yeah, and it just comes right back to, and they're also used to having to market themselves.
Yes.
So it's not strange to them.
Yeah. Well, Dennis, he was known for owning the brothels, but before he got into the brothel business, he sold timeshares. Mm-hmm. And if you could sell timeshares, right. You could sell pretty much anything.
And I hate timeshares.
Well, exactly. But I will say this, if you're a candidate out there, and you get one of those phone calls or emails that say, hey, come to a dinner, we want to give you a presentation, we're going to give you a free round-trip airfare to Disneyland and whatever, they're selling you a timeshare. Go to it, because those folks have got the marketing down to a science. Mm-hmm. They are great at it. Now, don't buy, unless you really want to buy a timeshare, right. But you should go just for the experience of seeing how the steps in the process they have you go through, leading you to asking for the money. It's unbelievably fantastic.
So what should candidates do before they even announce they're running?
Lots of things before they announce. There is a formula called ORVS, O-R-V-S, Optimal Republican Vote Strength. Most people have never heard of it.
I've never heard of it.
Dan Burdish, our mutual friend Dan Burdish. Mm-hmm. Dan Burdish knows how to run the ORVS numbers. And what it will tell you is based on previous vote history, what the odds are that a Republican challenger or a Republican candidate can win in that particular district. You don't have to have over 50%, but it will. I mean, if your ORVS number is 20, 30, 35%. Right,
you got to be within the margin of error, for
right,
sure. Yeah.
Right. So, you should look at that number. Don't go by the voter registration numbers. That's insane. There are morons in the media. I'm not going to mention John Ralston's name, but he really thinks that voter registration, that's the really key thing. It's not. And candidates shouldn't think only because there's more Democrats in a district that they can't win that district.
It's interesting you bring that up, because I had a candidate was talking to me about pretty much saying, well, if you look at the voter registration numbers, like if I win the primary, I'm automatically going to win the general because it's 50-50 and this is going to be a Republican year. And I'm like, okay, yeah. Red Wave 2014, a Democrat carried that same district and they were more upside down.
Then
there was 6,700 more registered Republicans in that district than Democrats, but he still won the general as a Democrat.
Yeah,
during the red wave. So you got to be careful with those registration numbers.
And then the next thing they need to do is to seriously look at themselves and assess whether or not they have any skeletons in their closet that might come out. And in this day and age, they will come out if you're considered a threat. Somebody's going to find what it is. And then you have to make a decision going in. Do Do I want to just sit on this and be prepared when it comes out? And if it comes out, then I'm going to, here's my response to it. Or do you want to inoculate yourself against it in advance? Now, in the case we were talking about Dennis Hoff, we pretty much knew that they were going to attack him for owning the brothel. So we laid out our whole argument on why that should not be an issue in the campaign. And we mailed the people in advance and told them, my opponent is going to, they're going to send you some ugly mailers about my business. And let me just lay it out for you ahead of time. And then when the opponent does hit them, all Dennis said was, see, I told you they were going to do that.
You know, that reminds me of, Eminem.
Yeah, all the great candy.
You're going to bring up 8 Mile.
8 Mile. Remember when he first came over there, the other guy was talking smack about him and his rap song, and Eminem lost, and then Eminem is like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So he come and rap about himself. He goes, I'm a trailer trash. My mother's a junkie.
Right.
Blah, 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 blah.
Exactly.
All right, now what you got?
Yeah.
Crickets.
Get it out first.
Yeah.
Get it out first, and then you get it out on your terms rather than getting it out at the time and choosing in place of your opponent's terms. So opposition research on yourself, and then do some opposition research on your opponent and find out where, especially if they're an incumbent, what their voting record is. Are there any flaws in their voting record you'll be able to use? And there's a whole bunch of other things that you need to talk about, your family and your finances. How much money are you willing to put into a campaign? And you need to put in something. Why should you, Steve Sanson, give me a donation for my run for office if I'm not willing to invest in my own race? Right. I mean, if I don't have confidence in my race, why should you?
And I say the same thing to candidates that are running for Congress that don't live in that district. How the hell do you expect me to vote for you if you can't vote for yourself?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't care what the law says.
Yeah.
How are you going to ask me for my vote if you can't vote for yourself?
Right.
Stay in your district. Right?
It's a legitimate point. It's a legitimate point.
I mean, that's how I look at it.
Yeah. But I think most voters, that whole carpetbagger issue that everybody always tries to bring up election, it doesn't move votes. I mean, it's a talking point. They'll throw it around on social media.
I don't like carpetbaggers.
Yeah, well, define what a carpetbagger is.
Somebody that moves into a district 30 days before they file for office.
There's candidates who've done or doing that this year.
Them. I don't like them.
Well, but they didn't.
They seem like opportunists to me. They're just
in some cases,
they're seat shopping.
in some cases, that's true. But a lot of candidates who, or like say, the really rock solid conservatives. They're in a Democrat district. They ain't going to get elected in that district. Their only chance of getting in office and actually doing something for us is to move to a more friendly district.
So they try to go up against a conservative in that district that could win, but now that person has a primary because you carpetbagging ass came all the way from Henderson to move in my district.
It can happen.
Now you're messing with me.
Right.
Right?
And then it becomes an issue in the campaign. If you're both conservatives, then that could be an issue that you could use in your campaign. But this year, it's far less of a concern for me because they screwed around so long in redrawing the new lines that candidates who would have moved in months and months and months ago to a new district were frozen. They couldn't until they released the lines, and I don't think they were officially released until like the 1st of February when people could actually go. And to this day, people are looking to figure out what district they're in. We're in March and they still can't figure out.
That's why the judicial thing is all screwed up because judicial candidates usually file in January. Now they're filing in March because of the redistricting.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So you're the president of Citizen Outreach. What is that?
We're a 501c4 grassroots advocacy organization. We're a nonprofit organization. Okay. And we're conservative. I mean, we're pressing for conservative legislation and promoting conservative issues and conservative ballot issues. Okay.
You still write for Muth's Truth?
I write Muth's Truth not as often as I used. I used to write pretty close to 7 days a week.
I remember something you said years ago to a candidate. Don't mess with me because I have a barrel of ink.
I ripped that old saying off, but it's true, and you've got the same position.
I
The
know.
old saying
And
was,
people are pissing me off, Chuck. They're going to let me write some crazy stuff about them.
yeah, well,
If I was you, I'll just shut up and don't say nothing.
the old saying is, don't pick a fight with someone who buys ink by the barrel, paper by the ton. That's the saying.
And don't pick a fight with somebody that got to have their own podcast.
Yeah, exactly. That's the modern day equivalent of it. Really, I mean, it's just foolish. It was like there's a candidate right now running for U.S. Senate, Adam Laxalt, did a press conference a few months ago, and a reporter from the Reno Gazette-Journal was there and tried to ask him a question. He just dressed the reporter down and said, "You've never written anything good about me. I'm not talking to you." And he just turned his back on the reporter and started talking to these other reporters. Well, what do you think that reporter's going to do now? Now, the reporter's a professional. I know him. His reports have always been objective, fair, and balanced. I got no problem with that. But because Adam took it personally, he decided he was going to pick a fight with this reporter because that's what Donald Trump does. So he thinks he's Donald Trump and that he can get away with it. Look, even Donald Trump didn't get away with it. I mean, I loved it every time he pointed the camera, and those people back there, they're the fake news, and they're the enemy of the people. I loved it, but all it did was stir them up. They weren't just opponents, then they became jihadis.
Yeah, see, I felt exactly the same way as you. I'm like, it's about time somebody said that, but then I'm like, maybe he shouldn't have done that, though.
Well, he could have done it during the campaign, but once he became president, it was probably time to dial it back a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
Well, what about those candidates when you interview them, right? And then you print their own words from the interview, and they get mad at you.
Yeah, I love that. That's the most powerful thing you can use against a person is their own words.
Watch the video.
Yeah, exactly. We've got that going on right now with Tisha Black decided to parachute in and challenge Sigal Chattah for Attorney General.
I saw that.
And she's running. Now she's got a Republican primary, so she's running as a conservative.
Right.
But when she ran in 2018 against Justin Jones for the county commission, she proudly told the Review Journal interview, I'm a moderate. Well, all I've done is tell Sigal, hey, here's the quote. Make sure everybody knows.
Maybe she got more conservative since then.
Which is possible, but not in this case.
So you also write for the Tribune.
Yes, well, I write my columns for Muth's Truths, and Rolando, God bless his heart, he just passed away recently, but Rolando asked, is it okay if we run any of your columns, if we find something that we think would be of interest? And I said, absolutely, you have access to it. Look, my opinion, I tell everybody, my opinions are like manure. They work best when spread around. So I told Rolando, absolutely, go ahead, just give me credit.
Well, his sister picked up the paper, and
wish her well.
And she's doing a good. He has a funeral celebration of life at the Ahern Hotel at 3 p.m. on Friday.
And I will be out of town. Unfortunately, I can't be there, but yeah. That's great. I hope it's a big turnout for him.
I hope so, because I'm going to be speaking. So I don't like to speak to an empty.
I can't stand that. I hate funerals to start with, let alone when Dennis passed away. Now, when you did mention that, so Dennis died 3 weeks before the election, still got over 60% of the vote. So if I can get a dead pimp elected. I think I know a little bit. And Dennis wouldn't be offended by that. I mean, his book was called The Art of the Pimp. I mean, he wore it. He's proudly. But his was legal in Nevada. It was a legal, honest business. And, God bless his soul. So but they did. They asked me to do the eulogy for Dennis at his memorial service. And I responded and said, well, I'm really honored. And I was going to say, but. And I said, I'm really honored. And before I could say but, they said, thank you, and hung up. So then I had to do it, and it turned out okay.
Did you write everything down, or did you do it from?
No, I didn't have to. Mainly, there were a lot of speakers who wanted to speak also at Dennis's funeral, say a few things, and I just had the list of who was, going to give their remarks, and I basically delivered his business partner's eulogy for her, and then introduced the other speakers. And Dennis, being who Dennis was, it wasn't a sad occasion. I mean, it was, but the people there, it was truly more of a celebration of life, and people were telling jokes from the stage and funny stories about Dennis. And knowing Dennis, he would have loved it, every minute of it. That's exactly the way he would have wanted to go out.
So why did you get involved in all this, Chuck?
Why did I? Yeah. How did I?
Because politics is your thing.
It is. It became, now my father was in the Maryland House of Delegates in the early 1980s. I grew up in a Democrat household. He was a union official in the fire department and decided he was going to run for the House of Delegates. So I'd been around politics from that, but wasn't really actively involved in it. When I moved out to Nevada in 1988, I was working for a car rental company. And you may know Kyle. Kyle Stevens works for Brady Industries, and he was my account rep. And so he was selling us all of our cleaning supplies. And I got to know Kyle, and we'd be sitting in the office talking. And he said, we found out that we had similar views. By that time, Reagan had been president, and I figured out, oh, no, I'm a Republican. I'm not a Democrat, and changed parties. And Kyle invited me to go to my first Central Committee meeting, 1990, 91, something like that. And I just became active at the Central Committee, ended up as, again, county chairman, executive director, and boom. I made a decision I started to say that Lynn Nofziger also in 1995, when I was a county chairman, he gave me a great piece of advice. He said, look, you can either do your business full time or you can do the party stuff full time, but you can't do both, or both are going to fail. And so I was fortunate enough that my wife at the time, we didn't have kids, didn't have a whole lot of expenses. We could live off of her income. So I shut my video production business down, a small-time video production business, shut that down and just started doing politics full-time. And again, when I became executive director, I realized, hey, I can make a living doing this. I can actually get paid. So that's what we did.
I'm going to take you down memory lane.
Oh, boy.
And it's a thank you, by the way.
Oh, okay.
But I'm going to take you down there, because I don't even think you know this. Do you remember when the president of Veterans in Politics back in 2004, Donald Fondersopoulos, he made a comment talking about a candidate that was getting money. And he got money from his Jewish constituents. And he made a comment saying, he did it in a text or something, I forget what it was, or an email. And he said something along the line that the candidate got the money from the Jew purse. Remember that?
I don't.
Okay. And Brent Howard, remember Brent Howard?
Right.
Okay.
No, Brent.
Said something to somebody, right? I don't know how he said what he said, but it went to John Hambrick, who was the county chair at the time, and you and John Hambrick came out against Donald Fondersopoulos about the Jew purse, saying that this guy is racist, blah, 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 blah.
Okay.
That's how I became president of Veterans in Politics, because he stepped down right after that.
So it's my fault, just like it's Kyle Stevens' fault for getting me into politics.
Yeah. and look how long. Well, Donald is the one that actually got me with Veterans in Politics. You're the one that got rid of Donald, and I took his place.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, way back then.
Yeah.
Well, that was a minute. Because I remember the gentleman who
was in the
Veterans
RJ.
in Politics before him in 1990s.
It was
wheelchairs?
Yeah, no, it wasn't Ed Goebel.
Yeah, Ed Goebel.
Goebel tried to steal it.
Right, well, but he was involved with it back when I was the county chairman. That's where I remember.
He was involved, but he wasn't the president. It was Castle P. Anderson who was.
Okay. I just remember Goebel because he was on the Central Committee and would come to all the meetings and be a pain in the neck.
And I got rid of Goebel.
Yeah. But you're right. I have this conversation with, we mentioned Dan Burdish earlier, and George Harris.
Who's that guy, George Harris?
George Harris.
Yes, with you.
But I mean, George is the one who talked me into running for county chair. Now, I've forgiven him since then.
He's been a county chairman too.
But he was the county chairman. That's what he was leaving to take a job as a lobbyist. He was going to, take a paid position too. Right. And so he didn't want the other two guys that were running. He didn't like either of the other two guys. Yeah. Half the Central Committee hated the one. The other half hated the other. Yeah. And I was too new for anybody to hate me. Now, that came later.
It's too new for anybody to hate me.
Right.
Until 15 minutes later.
But there really aren't many of us around from the mid-'90s that were involved actively in politics. They come and they go, and a lot of these first-time candidates, they're shooting stars. Yeah. They come on the scene. We've all been doing this for a long time, and they come in and they say, well, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, and you should be backing me, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. Yeah. And they lose, and you never hear from them again. Yeah. Yeah. It's just, it's sad. But we're old warriors in these battles.
So you what are you doing now?
What am I doing now? I am now working for, you mentioned where they're having the tribute to Rolando at Ahern. So now I'm working for Don Ahern, political affairs, advising and helping, because he's very busy. He gives a lot of money to a lot of candidates.
Hotel, though.
What's that?
There's no gaming in that hotel.
There's no gaming in the hotel. No, when he bought it, he decided he wanted to convert it into a convention facility. And so there's no gaming. He just wants to be able to do conventions in the facility. So I'm doing that. I'm working with a couple of candidates. I don't do a lot of these consultants will go out there and they'll get 10, 15, 20 candidates, and then they just stretch themselves so thin that they don't do the job for the candidates. So I've got 2, and that's about the most I'll take. I help a lot of others. Right, they can give me a call, and okay, fine. But I'm not writing things or doing strategy sessions and whatnot. I can only do so many hours in a day.
Speaking of writing, the first time I ever heard your name, I didn't know who you were. I believe you were in Reno at the time, but you wrote an article. And it was hilarious. It said, I might, paraphrasing, you went into a bunch of other stuff, but you talked about, just for the fun of it, I might move to Assembly District 8 and run against Barbara Buckley.
Barbara Sagavsky.
No, Buckley.
Oh,
she was the Speaker of the Assembly at the time.
Okay, right.
In 2008. And it was so funny, because I had already announced that I was going to run. My phone blows up. Chuck Muth is going to run. And I'm like, who's Chuck Muth? So, because honestly, I was 30 years old. Anyway, Sue Loudon was like, hey, if you're willing to walk, good on you. We give you the walk list. We'll help you out as much as we can with stuff like that. And so I get a call, and I'm like, who
is this guy?
Chuck Muth. I was like, well, I just went and talked to Heidi Gansert and thought everything was good. And then so I called Steve, and Steve was like, oh, yeah. He goes, well, I know Chuck pretty well. He's a pretty good guy. He goes, knowing Chuck, he's just trying to stir the pot.
Steve was right.
Because that's not...
Chuck ain't gonna run for no race.
And she is not his favorite person. So he just wanted to shake that crap.
He doesn't want to be the person in the news.
We did leave something. Background. So I came back from Newt Gingrich's campaign management school, and I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach other candidates. But as county chairman, I had brought in other people to train candidates to do campaign schools.
Right. Yeah.
And I got these poli-sci graduates that the RNC sent in, and they're reading out of the manual. And it says on here on page 42 that when you're walking door to door, you should always walk on the north side first, and then it's you guys, have you ever run? They hadn't. And I knew that if I wanted to be effective training, I should run myself. I should get the experience. So in 1996, again, this was another George Harris special. He talked me into running against Dina Titus for her state Senate seat. And I knew I wasn't going to win the race because of that was a 3-1 Democrat district. But I really wanted to get the experience. I wanted to be able to stand up in front of a group of candidates in Las Vegas and say, I know what it's like to walk door to door when it's 112 degrees. Yeah. I've been there. I've done that. Yeah. So you have a little bit more moral authority if you've actually been a candidate. But a lot of these consultants, they've never run, and they don't know what it's like. You've run. Did you run?
Yeah, I ran.
Okay, so look, other than the Maytag repairman, I think a candidate is the loneliest person on the planet, because until you've actually been a candidate, you can't fully appreciate the pressure that comes with that. You've got your whole reputation on the line, and your entire life is an open book. And you got to do, if you're not experienced in sales, you got to do things that you're not comfortable doing. A lot of times speaking in public scares a lot of candidates. A lot of them are really bad at it. And you got to ask people for money. It's really tough. And when you got to make those tough decisions as a consultant, as an advisor, I can only say, look, you can either do A or B. If you do A, here's what could possibly go well, and here's what could possibly go wrong. B, here's what could go well, and here's what could go wrong. It could happen either way. The bottom line is you have to make the decision that you feel comfortable with. And so it's a very, very lonely experience when you're out there. And I think it's tough for a lot of these consultants who have never done it to be able to stand up and talk to candidates that have not been down that road like we all have.
What would you tell voters that don't vote? Oh, they're not really voters. What would you tell Nevadans that don't vote?
Stay home.
Really?
Yeah, stay home. Now, look, you said voters in general. Now, if they're not voting, I assume they have absolutely no ideological.
They're not educated.
Yeah, they don't know what they'd be voting for anyway. So please do me a favor, stay home and don't cancel out my vote.
Right.
If you want to become an informed voter, I hate this stuff with it, and even the government is telling people, go vote, and they're browbeating them into going vote. I want anybody who is legally eligible to vote to be able to vote. But if you're not an informed voter and you want to stay home and you don't want to go out and vote, God bless you, stay home.
Yeah,
Let those of us who are actually informed make the decision.
That's why, and I understand everybody means well about, like, get out and vote. And I'm a strong proponent of getting out and voting too. But some of this stuff that I see, like, and this is years ago, like when MTV had Rock the Vote. No, I'm not trying to pick. I was watching MTV, and I'm an informed voter, right? But I'm just going, okay, so you're basically just telling everybody to go out and vote.
Yeah.
How many people that will literally just go and they'll, in presidential years, and they'll be like, okay, I'm a Democrat, and so obviously I'm going to vote for Joe Biden, and I'm going to pick every single D I can find.
Yeah.
And I'm going to skip the judges. Anything that says MP, I don't even know what that means.
Right.
And turn in a ballot.
Yeah. No,
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. And
It
that's
really
what
is.
I'm saying.
It's a
I'd rather
shame.
not, don't vote.
Yeah.
If you really don't know what you're voting on, you don't know the ballot questions, you don't know the candidates. So I agree with you. I mean, they do leave the judicial races blank and the nonpartisan races blank, but I'm okay with that. That drop off. If you know who you want to vote for president, but you don't know who to vote for anything else, great, don't vote for it. They do it only because they feel that they're obligated to do it, and they've been browbeat, usually by the government.
Right.
You got to vote, you got to vote, you got to vote. No, you don't. That's part of what being free in America is that you don't have to vote. I was talking to someone yesterday whose idea was everybody should be required to vote. And I just bit my tongue on that one and said, no.
Yeah, I've heard that, and then, and I'm not going to give his name any credit on the show because we had a falling out years ago, that said that voting, the day of voting should be a holiday, should be a paid holiday. And I'm like, yeah, okay, great. I said, actually, because he's one of those who wants everybody to vote, very liberal guy, right?
Right.
Wants everybody to vote, whether they're educated or not, And I'm like, well, that's actually going to hurt your cause because on holidays, people are going to be out at the lake or barbecuing. They're not going to go to vote.
Right.
Look at what happens on Memorial Day. How many people even know what Memorial Day stands for, really? They're out at the lake.
For that matter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm all for making Election Day a national holiday. I'm all for it. Now tell me which of the other national holidays you're going to cancel to make that one a national
There you
holiday.
go. Yep.
Okay, I mean, we can't. Next thing, if we keep going down this road, we keep having all these national holidays. It's going to be unusual if it's not a national holiday.
Right, yeah,
but there's no excuse for it here in Nevada, unlike a lot of other states, because I do travel and I train in other states, so I know they have different election laws. Mm-hmm. But here, you can request an absentee ballot. Prior to last year, you can request an absentee ballot without giving a reason. I just did a campaign boot camp in Connecticut. You have to provide a reason why you're requesting an absentee ballot there. Mm-hmm. So in Nevada, it's very liberal as far as that's concerned. We have early voting 2 weeks before Election Day. If you can't figure out how to get in to vote within a 2-week period, maybe you should stay home. Or you still have the option of voting absentee ballot. So there's no excuse. If you don't want to vote, you don't want to be informed on the vote, do us all a favor, stay home.
Could you explain, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, but you're used to it. Could you...
Do you want me to rip off the microphone and walk out of here?
could you explain how we could amend the Constitution, the Nevada Constitution, or how we could change the Nevada Constitution? What's the steps?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's not Sam. That's a great question. You have to get 10% of the number of people who voted in the last general election. 10% of those voters have to sign an initiative petition. Registered voters have to sign a petition. Then the petition, the signatures are verified by the election department, the Secretary of State's office. And if you qualify and you get enough, then your initiative goes on the ballot to amend the Constitution in the next election. But in Nevada, it's a two-step process. So it not only has to pass once, it has to pass the second time 2 years later in the general election, which is how the 2/3 vote, it requires a 2/3 vote of the legislature to pass a tax increase. Former Governor Jim Gibbons, then congressman, put that on the ballot in the 1990s, and it passed the one election. 2 years later, it passed the next election. Then it became part of our Constitution, and the Democrats have been trying to get around it ever since.
And how long this process takes?
The signature gathering process?
The whole process to amend or change the Constitution, which is the same thing.
Yeah, well, that's if we
Nevada Constitution.
Yeah.
How long does that process
If you wanted to amend the Constitution this year, you need to get, I believe it's around 140,000 signatures, which is pretty high. Signatures on the initiative petition, and they have to be turned in by sometime in June, the middle toward the end of June. You have to submit them by then. And if you do, then the voters will vote in it in 2022, in November. If it passes, 2 years later in 2024, the voters will vote on it again.
Because the reason why I ask you, Chuck, and the reason why I ask for you to explain it instead of one of us to do it, is because we had a candidate on here last week that was talking about getting a lottery in this state to help the homeless. Right.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, the Constitution says lottery is not allowed in this state by any means. I don't care if it was a nonprofit, for-profit. Lottery is not allowed in this state at all. Period. It was in bold letters too. So when I have a candidate that's talking about that crap, I'm saying to myself, my God. This guy shouldn't be running for us.
Well, yeah, he didn't do his homework.
Yes.
Now, you bring up a good point, and I miss this, because there is a second way to amend the Constitution without going through the signature gathering process.
Tell us the
legislature can put a constitutional amendment on the ballot without going through the signature
But the
process.
people still have to vote.
The people still have to vote. But you mentioned the lottery, and that's interesting, too, because the lottery is in the Constitution. There's a prohibition. You're absolutely right. How it got there is interesting, though, because it wasn't in the Constitution when we drafted it in the 1800s. It wasn't put in until the 1990s when lotteries started to pick up around the country, and the gaming industry said, oh, no, we don't want that competition in our state. So they put a lot of money into getting it on the ballot and making sure that the people voted to ban lotteries. Now, I think things have changed dramatically since then. And if people really wanted to have a lottery, I wouldn't want to designate it for the homeless people necessarily. But if you want to have I'd rather let's give school vouchers to students. That would be my personal preference. But if you wanted a lottery.
Pass the ESAs.
Yeah, pass the ESAs. I think that if you wanted to do it, I think you would probably get that amended, that repealed, just like we repealed prohibition at the federal level. I think that the voters in Nevada would repeal that lottery prohibition if it made it to the ballot. You
should have a class for people that run for legislators, because there's a lot of people that have no clue what a legislator does, but they think they do, but they really don't. And they don't know
how. That includes incumbents who are there.
And they don't even know how the process works. They know nothing about committees and how it has to go on the floor and get a sponsor and have a bill draft request. And they know nothing about but yet they want to be the person that be lawmakers for a state when they don't know how the process even works. But they think they do. They talk a good game, but they really don't. And you're like the intelligent people that understands the process be like, man, this guy's stupid.
That will happen.
You take back like, who the hell he's trying to pull this bullshit on?
Yeah.
Tell that to somebody that's not educated,
And they do, after you're elected, the legislature, the Legislative Council Bureau in Carson City, they do bring the candidates up and they give them an orientation and they walk through the process. But until you've actually lived through it, Annie Black, Assemblywoman Annie Black. Now, she was pretty well familiar. She was on the Mesquite City Council. So she had been through the government process before. But even she said when she got up there a year ago, as a freshman, The process up there is miles different from being on a city council.
Miles.
They use a whole different set of rules, and you got to learn all of the rules. So even though they know the process is you have to put your bill draft requests in by this date, and you have to do this to get co-sponsors and all, once you get on the floor of that legislature, and you think that all you have to do is push your button and say, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion. If they don't want to hear your motion, they got all kinds of ways to shut you down. So it was a very tough learning experience in the beginning for Annie, but by the time that session was over, she pretty well mastered it, and she showed especially Republicans, here's what one person can do if you're willing to learn the system and actually stand up and fight, in the minority.
She's one of my favorite people. She's super bright.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Annie a lot. I have a lot of respect for her.
And she learned from the ones who are up there. They figure they're in the minority. I'm not going to make a stink or anything else.
I've heard that so many times from Republicans in the legislature. Well, there's nothing we can do. We're in the minority. Like, for crying out loud. Or the thing that drives me nuts too is that's the excuse I've heard from, and we brought him up before we came on air. John Hambrick. He was like, well, Jim, you got to understand when you're up there and you're in the minority, in order to get anything done, you got to do a lot more compromising than you thought. And I was like, John, I've known you for how many years? Like, I understand like some give and take or whatever, but I said, where's your line?
Yeah,
like,
well, the problem is
that line is completely gone now. You're just like going to sign on, and then the Democrats are going to get credit for all this stuff, and you're trashing the state.
Yeah. The problem is, in a compromise situation in Carson City, the Democrats' version is we get the gold mine and you get the shaft.
Right. Yeah.
And our team says, we have to compromise, we have to work together, and we end up with table scraps. Right. They get something big, and we get table scraps. Look, if you were going to vote for that tax increase in 2015, fine. But what did you get back in return from the Democrats? It's big, not something small. If you're going to give them something that big, we should get something that big back also. Now, I'm going to take you back. We're talking about going way back in time machine. Newt Gingrich, we're talking again. Remember, he came into Congress in 1980, give or take, as a freshman, and his goal in life was to get the majority, which he finally won in 1994. It took 14 years. It doesn't happen overnight. But one of the things that he did was he found out what C-SPAN had come in, and they had these 1 minute or 3 minute segments where any member could go on the floor and be on C-SPAN and talk about any issue that they wanted. And they were on camera, and then they could use that politically. And he made expert use of that, drove the Democrats nuts. Well, Annie did the same thing last year. When she had the opportunity to stand up on the floor and speak, she stood up and she hammered the governor and the Democrats for keeping the legislative building closed and not letting the citizens in, and the emergency mask orders. And she used that forum while she was on camera as an official on the assembly floor, and that's what you can do. But our team, they are so set on being in a minority, they forget that what the real job is, not to be the minority party, but to be the opposition party. Our job's not to try to find common ground and work out with them. They don't do that for our side. Our job is to oppose the bad stuff.
Well, one thing I call the legislation college campus, for fraternities, because if you sponsor a bill and somebody that's head of a chair that this bill is going to go to, and they don't like you, the bill never gets heard.
Right.
So it
Stick
never
it
gets
in the
on
desk
the floor.
drawer, never sees
but
the light
that's
of day.
stupid. Even if that bill is the betterment of Nevadans, they still won't have the bill get heard because they don't like the person's name that's sponsoring. And I think that's just a childish way to do things.
It is.
I think committees should be open. That the committee members should vote on a bill if the bill wants to be heard or not. I don't think that the chair should be the one person that says, we're not going to hear it.
Right, but let's be fair. When Republicans have the power, they do the same thing. They enjoy the power. Then they're just angry.
Across the board for me.
Right, but in that case, again, they have the ability to just stick the bill in the drawer and never sees the light of day. Annie knew that going in. She knew that. But when they tried doing that, she made a stink about it on the floor and raised enough of a ruckus that they ended up having to bring it back out anyway on the floor. So, I mean, if you just sit back and take it and thank you, sir, may I have another, they're just going to continue to roll over you. You make a stink. Yeah. That's what they say. What do they say? The squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Yeah, you got to be, it's just kind of like what I talk about with trial attorneys. I mean, you got to have some thick skin. Like I forget, I think it was, no, it wasn't Horowitz, it was someone else that said it is literally political war.
Yeah.
Like when you're up there, like it's not. And
well, I know you guys know this. When I train candidates, I have a set of recommended reading. You got to read these books.
Yeah.
First off, and one of the number one, maybe it's either number one or number two, is The Art of War by Sun Tzu, because a political campaign is war without the bloodshed, except in certain counties in Georgia. I mean, that's a different story altogether, but normally there's not a whole lot of bloodshed in a campaign. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Oh yeah, I forgot to bring that up. Anyway.
So Mr. Muth, did anything you want to say that we haven't covered?
Oh gosh, we could be here for days. Thank you for having me on. I mean, this is great. I'm glad we got to sit down and talk.
After 20 years.
I will say one thing, and because we talked about door knocking. And this is a big bone of contention. So I've heard moron political consultants and campaign managers who think they know what they're talking about. And here's the saying: you walk, you win. You don't, you won't. Well, that's bull. I know a lot of candidates who walked and knocked on a lot of doors that lost. I know a lot of candidates who never knocked on a single door and won. So walking, if you think that walking is a silver bullet and is going to win your election, you're crazy. The fact of the matter is...
So how should they win the election?
Those undecided voters, the ones that aren't ideological like we are, they don't tune in until 2 to 4 weeks before the election. You can't knock all of those doors in 2 to 4 weeks. I'm sorry, you just can't. You got to be able to get to them with paid media, mostly direct mail for small races like we're talking about, school board, state legislature. You got to do it with mail. There's something to be said these days for social media and paid advertising on social media, but it's not as effective as in the mail. It just isn't. But the mail costs money. So I'm not saying never knock doors, don't knock doors, but you got to take the fundraising serious.
Yeah, when I saw the bill for some mailers we were going to do, I was like, it wasn't outside the budget, but it was steeper than what I thought it was going to be.
Well, at that point, and that's why I said you want a campaign manager who's good at guerrilla warfare and bootstrapping. So what you can do, if you have a large contingent of volunteers, you pay for the printing, but instead of paying the post office to deliver it to mailboxes, you have your volunteers deliver it to the door. Now, volunteers don't put it in the mailbox. That's against federal law. Right. But you can put the material, at the home and leave it, and then you save the money on the postage.
But if you don't have money for this mailer, the best thing to do, in my opinion, is to door knock so you can see who your constituents are and have that conversation with them to kind of make a rapport and leave a yard sign right in their front of their house so they can remember you, even if you show up a month before early voting. At least they have that memory of your yard sign right in their front of their yard, so they could always remember, okay, I'm going to vote for that guy. I'm going to vote for that guy.
I'm not saying don't knock.
That guy came to my house 3 weeks ago.
But I hear what you just said from candidates all the time. They're just going to walk doors because they can't raise the money. They can't raise the money because they haven't tried. Anybody can raise money, but you got to learn how to do it, which is, again, why I love salespeople in this. If you know that the way to win, the best chance to win is I have to do 5 mailers and it's going to cost me $5,000 for each mailer, then instead of being out there right now in March knocking on doors, you should be on the phone raising the $25,000 you need, because that's what you know when if you've written a campaign plan. Your campaign plan says we need to do 5 mailers if we're going to win this race, and it's going to cost $25,000. And doggone it, you better be out there raising money in March instead of knocking on doors.
Well, Chuck Muth, I want to thank you for coming on the program.
My pleasure.
Look in the camera, say whatever you want, give a point of contact, please.
Hey, if you're interested in learning how to run campaigns or you're a candidate, go to campaigndoctor.com and just enter your email address. I put out free email for candidates, and you'll learn a lot more about how to really win a race. Go to campaigndoctor.com. And again, thank you, gentlemen, for having me.
Thank you, Chuck. Thanks, Chuck. Folks, that's Chuck Muth, the president of Citizens Outreach. This is Steve Sanson, Jim Jonas with Veterans in Politics. Until next time.